What's happening, you filthy animals? It's your boy Jack Slack, coming at you on the 12th of June. A fairly shitty Tuesday, weather-wise, in the UK, though the pollen is off the charts. So if you hear me sniffling, that's what it is. And what a weekend we had! Terrific fight between... Well, yeah, the single fight that I'm talking about was terrific. I mean, the event was pretty good, actually. I'll tell you what did surprise me at UFC 225. All the heavyweights were entertaining. When you put 3 heavyweight fights on a card, and one of them's Andrei Arlovski, I normally go, oh dear. But yeah, watched them all, really entertained by them. Can't say the same thing for the other super heavyweight fight in this weekend, Tyson Fury. That's just a little bit tragic, but I'll probably write something about him generally in the week. Post-fight breakdown of Whittaker versus Romero is already up on Vice, or Fightland, or wherever I am now, and you can check that out. If you can't be asked to look for it on Vice Sports, go to thefightprimer.com. It's the first piece there, and it links through, because I'm doing a good job keeping that up to date now. But before we jump into possible fight of the year, let's talk about the news. First piece of news, and I think it's quite an important one, Ariel Helwani does his last MMA hour ever, or at least until his ESPN deal falls through or whatever happens there. You never know in the game of journalism. Now, I, as an Uber, don't often talk about taxi matters, but, oh God. An Uber does not concern himself with the opinions of taxis. But Ariel Helwani, very important character in the media landscape of MMA. He was doing this long before me, or rather was covering MMA long before I started doing it in a formal capacity. And he was doing it when there was nothing in it, like no money, no fame, no nothing. He was just stood backstage at these events talking to people and you like, who the hell is this guy? So he's really done the grind. I mean, if you watch... I was going to say if you watch the MMA hour, but that's a bit of a grind too. But I mean, the number of interviews that he puts out, the number of events he has to go to, he's just got a ridiculous schedule. He's a very hard-working guy, and nobody probably deserves it more. Does leave the MMA fighting team in a bit of a lurch. They do have most of the best writers in MMA, spare me, obviously. But a lot of their filler comes from writing up MMA hour articles. And occasionally writing up Joe Rogan Experience articles from the previous week. But yeah, props to Helwani. Have a salute. I'm doing one here. And I look forward to seeing what his new show with Chael's like. Other news, Ronda Rousey's going into the Hall of Fame. I mean, who's arguing with this? Like, there's a few people who are like, rah, she got exposed. And you're like, well, yeah, obviously she's not as good as a lot of the fighters in the male... Well, most of the fighters at the top of the male... Well, all of the fighters at the top of the male divisions, because the female divisions are generally considerably worse, technically and athletically, for the most part. However, we're not pretending that Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie could come in today and actually do anything useful, even in their prime. So, she was an important figure. And a lot of people say, well, Gina Carano, but if we're looking at the raw numbers, I think there's no real argument. It's Ronda Rousey was the... Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor are the reason that the UFC sold for $4 billion. And her retirement and Conor McGregor's disappearance are the reason that Endeavour is now holding its dick and going, what happened? But yeah, power to her. And if you saw her at WrestleMania, she's actually pretty good in the ring. So yeah, well done to her. What else happened? DJ versus Cejudo 2 was scheduled for the UFC 227. Lots of people really excited about this. Meh, I mean, at least it's Cejudo. At least it's a fairly interesting fighter who appears to be getting better. But generally, just could not care less. Rising books Takanori Gomi versus Andy Sauer. Oh, who wants to be depressed? Mind you, it is Andy Sauer in an MMA match, so Gomi will take him down and beat him up. Or should. I mean, if Gomi loses this one, that's tragic. And a lot of his recent career has already been tragic. And on the subject of tragic and Asian MMA, ONE FC booked Renzo Gracie, who has got to be pushing 60, against Yuki Kondo, who is also old as fuck. And hasn't been good in a very long time. But, whatever keeps Renzo Gracie off the streets and out of street fights. And right, let's talk about the event, UFC 225. I actually had a lot of fun watching this one. Dan Ige versus Mike Santiago. Not a very long fight. 50 seconds around one. Took him to get the back and pound him out. But there was a nice application of a lead-handed uppercut in this one. Typically, not very effectively used punch. One way that is more effective to use it, and I think it was Jack Dempsey recommended it this way, was to square up your stance first. He believed that you couldn't get good power in your lead-handed uppercut unless you were squared up so that you could lift up from underneath with your legs. Obviously, guys like Prince Nazim had like the long leaping spearing uppercut, but I think for a true uppercut, you really do need to square up a bit from your standard more bladed stance. And Ige throws, I think it was a right hand, and then stepped up and threw the left uppercut. He was running while he did it, but it was just neat that the uppercut landed in the sort of way that good lead hand uppercutters do. Not an awful lot else to say about that fight. I just remember thinking, oh, nice lead uppercut. Charles Oliveira versus Clay Guida. In the course of briefly talking about this last week, I was saying, oh, Charles Oliveira doesn't have a very good chin, but Clay Guida doesn't have very good hands. Oh, but Clay Guida likes to wrestle. At no point did I remember, oh yeah, Charles Oliveira, his whole thing is the front headlock, the guillotines, the Do Bronx choke, all those sort of things. And he did a really good job. He was doing well with the striking. Flustered Clay Guida enough that he took a poor shot, and that's where you get your guillotines. Still a very reliable style of fighting, worked at the highest levels, Verdum to Cain Velasquez. If you can force a bad shot and you've got a very good guillotine, I would just put that as one of the sort of main paths to victory, to be honest. Up there was like take him down and get to the back or mount and just box him up on the feet. Yeah, it's, actually we didn't even mention that Brian Ortega, half of his game is based on that too. Land some good strikes, fluster them, grab their neck when they shoot in. Sergio Pettis versus Joseph Benavidez. This one was a little bit controversial, but obviously because it's flyweights, people don't actually care that much. But the decision was a little bit sketchy. Sergio Pettis got a 30-27. I definitely didn't have him winning all 3 rounds. But that first round, Joseph Benavidez, just his strike, well, actually throughout the fight, his striking looked pretty abysmal. It's like he was trying lots of clever different things and mixing it up really well, but his head was always up in the air and came in on a straight line. So Pettis cracked him with a gliding back right hand, I think it was. And for the rest of the first and second round, that was all he did. He looked like... If you ever played the Fight Night games, I think it was Fight Night Champion, the last one. Might have been Fight Night Round 3 or... I can't remember what the one before it was. But basically every year there was something that you could do to just sort of cheese the system. And one year, I think it was the most recent, you could tap the analog stick away from the opponent to do a little glide back, and then you tap whatever button or stick movement it was to throw the right straight. And if they moved in after you, it was a counter punch. So it got more damage than the other punches, and it worked really well because you could backstep away from anything. So it was a thing that people just did that. They just stood in front of you and kept tapping back towards towards the ropes. But where it ate a lot of stamina in that game, if you missed, it eats no stamina in real life. So Sergio Pettis just kept doing this. It was a really cheesy strat, but kept working because Benavidez just seemed to get angrier and angrier. Also, his hair was fucking awful. I mean, how old is he? He's got to be 30-something. And he's doing bleach blonde hair for the first time. Yeah, he's 33. Grow up, man. But otherwise, not bad. I mean, it was a decent performance. Sergio Pettis is one of those ones we're just waiting for him to actually happen. There's so much potential there, but also... he seems to get into like one idea whenever he fights, and he's not as flowy as he could be. If you watch some of his earlier fights, he's a lot more earlier fights in the UFC. He's a lot more flowing between ideas, and he also looks a little bit numb on the feet sometimes, like against John Moraga. John Moraga was getting in faster than Pettis. It was only because Pettis realised that if he threw back after he'd been hit, Moraga would just stand there and take it and get hit. So he was hitting him 2 times for every time that Moraga was punching him in the face, but. Yeah, I'm waiting for Pettis to happen. I do hope he does happen at some point. Anthony Smith versus Rashad Evans. We said this would be sad, and it was. Rashad Evans, they've shopped him around multiple commissions to get him cleared. He is not a healthy... Well, I mean, he's healthy compared to the general population, but he's not healthy enough to be punched in the head, or kneed in the head for a living. It took Smith all of 50 seconds to, not at his natural weight class, to just smash a guy who used to be a champion there. Very, very sad. Rashad Evans, please hang up your gloves. The other Rashad of the evening, who actually impressed me, I'd seen Rashad Coulter versus Tai Tuivasa, and I thought he was Well, he was sort of a punching bag there, but he looked pretty good here. I mean, he was still sort of swanging and banging, but he was really good fun. And Chris De La Rocha was doing a good job too. It was just a good, fun heavyweight scrap. And the corner advice was amazing. He's a big old Mexican with a big old head. Stop trying to knock him out. They were asking Rashad Coulter to box him up, but that was never going to happen, just because he wouldn't not swing for the fences or whatever it is. It was a nice moment where Coulter got hit hard or was tired or something like that, and he was sort of flagging, and De La Rocha moved in, and Coulter put his back to the fence and grabbed the overhook as De La Rocha stepped in to swing, and then leaned back on the fence with the overhook. That's what Conor McGregor was doing against Nate Diaz. You know, if you're not worried about the dude taking you down and you think you can fight off the fence, take that overhook and you're going to be dealing with less two-handed swinging and more sort of like trying to dig in with one punch at a time, not really big power punches because they won't be able to move their hips as well. You've done a tie-up basically, and it's one that's interesting because it worked so well against Nate Diaz and Chris De La Rocha here. But we were talking about it. Well, I was talking about it in my article this week about Romero versus Whittaker. I was saying that there's no real right way to fight when hurt. If you fight back too much, you get knocked out. If you don't fight back at all, you get overwhelmed and the ref will just stop it because you're just taking punches on your guard and doing nothing. If you clinch, that can be the answer against someone if you think you're strong enough to hold yourself up in the clinch along the fence against them. Tying up in boxing is the answer because that buys you time and the referee will stop it and reset you. But if you tie up like Yoel Romero, that's going to go awfully for you. If you grab an overhook and say, okay, come in and grab a hold of my waist and I'll just fight you off from there. So it really is depending on who you fight. But that was a really good solid scrap between De La Rocha and Rashad Coulter, and I gained a lot of respect for both guys actually, which surprised me because they're heavyweights. Mirsad Bektic versus Ricardo Lamas. I only vaguely remember bits of this. It turned into a bit of a slog at points. But I did get tagged in something on Reddit immediately afterwards. There was a quote of me saying, Ricardo Lamas' striking is mainly about spinning kicks and nothing else. And then in this fight, he got to the point where he was like, better do something big. And then just did the spinning kick and got bundled onto his ass immediately. It was sort of, it was like, well, I was going to say like Uriah Hall, but Uriah Hall has actually knocked out people with wheel kicks before. It's like someone who throws lots of wheel kicks but doesn't ever land them and has never knocked anyone out with them. So like Ricardo Lamas, where he goes, I need some of that patented Lamas last-minute magic. I failed to wall and stall this guy or lay on him. Better spin for a kick, and then gets taken down again. I did like Ricardo Lamas' guard play in this fight. I don't know if you guys saw it, but, you would have seen it, but I don't know if you noticed it at the time, but Bektic was postured down in his guard, so he'd grab over the back, and then he'd put the knee shield in, like scissor his hips out and put the knee shield in, and then he'd swim the hook in and start sitting up on his side. So he basically had one butterfly hook in across the body, like an inside hook, and he was sitting up on his side, threatening to stand up, and then if Bektic came in, he'd try and guillotine him. And he went to it over and over again. I thought it was really clever, actually. Just, I don't know how much... He did hit a wicked butterfly sweep from a very similar sort of position with one hook in, where Bektic was working on that arm triangle, and that was the danger of going for this guillotine all the time. If Bektic got him flat, he could start attacking the arm triangle or pressuring towards the arm triangle. Lamas was pulling the arm away from his neck, and he pulled it down and then released it as Bektic leaned back into him and swept him overhead, or tried to. I can't remember if he completed it or it just caused a scramble, but it was a very cool sweep. I will go back and watch that. Ricardo Lamas on his back, a lot more entertaining than Ricardo Lamas on top. So Bektic moves forward with the split decision. I don't remember being outraged by that. I don't remember being like, I felt Ricardo Lamas did enough to win. His striking just wasn't anything. And while the grappling was good, evenly matched stuff, Bektic actually landed some strikes on the feet. So I gave it to him. Guida versus Esparza, I was only sort of watching this one, I'll be honest. But mainly because Carla Esparza, I know for only being able to wrestle, and Claudia Gadelha, I know for only being able to go 1.5 rounds before she gasses, because she cuts too much weight. But it keeps working because she's in 3-round fights and they give her the decision. Just like, she will never win a title unless she can finish it quickly, because she always gasses. I have never seen a fight of hers that goes... She's finished someone recently, but most of her fights go the distance, and most of her fights she gasses. Gassed against Andrade, gassed against Jacek. I do remember her slowing down against Casey. Yeah, just like serial gasser. Stop cutting so much weight. There is a flyweight division now. But I was surprised that Carla Esparza actually bit down on the gum shield and did a little bit of striking. It wasn't super technical, but she was going for it. People were saying this was fight of the night. I barely, I wasn't really paying full attention on this fight, but it was better than I expected. I remember being surprised by that. Good on Carla Esparza, though, because there was a time after that Jacek loss where she disappeared for a year and was on Instagram putting on a ton of weight. And we were saying, like, oh, she's done. She's never coming back. She's been exposed. She can only wrestle. But she's actually doing okay now. So good for her. I will say, they have this uniform policy, and she always comes in looking like trash, like she's wearing her dad's swimming t-shirt. At least they found her a wife beater / string vest that almost fit this time. I just don't understand. You have this uniform policy. You have a uniform manufacturer. Can they not find you something for length that doesn't look like garbage? It looked like they just stitched a Reebok patch onto a Primark. Oh, you guys don't have Primark if you're in America. Primani. It looked like they stitched a Reebok patch onto a Primani string vest. It was dreadful. Which reminded me that I didn't talk about, when we talk about Nunes versus Pennington, every single exchange at the end, she would have to fiddle around with her sports bra thing, top, whatever it is. Yeah, just awful that they have to do that. Women's uniform does not seem to be going well in the UFC. At least with men, you only got shorts to worry about. And the only one who really fucked it up was BJ Penn, who wore them inside out to have the little black string look like the black belt, which is the stupidest thing. Anyway, where were we? Curtis Blades versus Alistair Overeem. I quite enjoyed this. They're talking about Blades next for the title. They're talking about Blades as the future. Blades is... If Blades had hands, I'd be so much more sold on him. He was jabbing up Ngannou, but standing there for the punch every time afterwards, admiring his work and getting countered. That was the fight where I knew that Ngannou was going to have trouble with good boxing. Yeah, Blades has good speed on his feet, but not very good technique or habits. He doesn't move his head after he punches. He throws one punch at a time. And Overeem was leading him around the ring, doing well with his usual stuff, stepping in, trying to knee him, punch him, elbow him. Curtis Blades ate a hard knee to the face. And, you're talking about Alistair Overeem, who has put people face down unconscious for minutes at a time with knees. And Blades just ate it full flush. Wobbled a little bit, but didn't seem like he was going to go out. Survived well, came through. Third round, he gets top position, and it looked like it was going to decision. And to be honest, Alistair Overeem could have got the nod. But just like 2 minutes 30 into the third round, he just opens up with elbows from top position and smashes Overeem's face open with the first one. And each one, there's more blood. It was really weird to watch. It was like his elbow was full of paintballs, and he just smashed them on Overeem's head. Pretty gruesome finish, but awesome nonetheless. Overeem was doing something very interesting. Well, Blades was advancing to half guard, and his corner like, don't let him push you up. Because Overeem would put his hand on his face, push him up, and then try and reap the free leg. Which, if you watch any Danaher Death Squad stuff, or if you watch the Danaher DVDs, or if you watch... this is Gordon Ryan and Eddie Cummings' go-to move. They get half guard, insert the butterfly hook on the outside. The outside leg goes in for the butterfly hook. They take a wrist, either the near one or the far one, and they pull the opponent on top of them while bringing the leg that's in the half guard over the top to reap the opponent's free leg, or rather entrap the opponent's free leg. If you watch Gordon Ryan versus Zanjay, if you watch Gordon Ryan versus anyone where he ever ends up on the bottom, he does this an awful lot. I think he learned it from Tom DeBlas. It's a Tom DeBlas sort of move. Overeem was doing it very interesting because he didn't have the inside hook with his non-half guard leg, so he'd swing the leg over, the half guard leg over the top of the opponent's free leg, and then he'd have to try and swing his he had his left leg. If he was reaping with his right leg, he had his left leg hanging out in space, whereas the Danaher guys really make sure to have it on the inside, so they're in like a single leg X or ashigarami or whatever they call it. Overeem had a lot of pummeling to do with that leg after he'd already got the knee reap. Came close on a couple of heel hooks, and he did keep going to it over and over again, but it was just noticeable that considerable difference between his technique there and the guys who do it from half guard all the time, the Danaher Death Squad guys. Very Very interesting, though, because it really did fluster Blades, and his corner were like, do not stall in half guard, do not posture up in half guard, don't try and go straight to mount, just get to side control as soon as possible and keep your head down. Overeem's pretty fun off. I mean, I said this last time, didn't I? I said Overeem's pretty fun off his back. We just don't see it much. And he kept attacking. And that's what people like about Overeem. You know, sometimes he'll put on a boring performance, but most of the time, for a very long time, he had a 90% finishing rate with like a 90% finished in losses rate. So he always is looking to try and hurt people. And on the subject of people getting hurt, CM Punk versus Mike Jackson, just appalling, really. And if there's one thing that I saw in this, I mean, if you watch the opening round, he sort of opens up more and becomes more clumsy and swinging. But if you watch the opening round, CM Punk looks like a guy trying to do what he's been told to do. Like he was trying to do something that wasn't him. Which you could say about his MMA career just generally, but he looked very wooden, and he was holding this weird stance and doing this weird footwork and throwing these weird long low kicks that weren't working. And I think that, you know, people are going to say, like, he's just not made for this sport, and I think that's true to an extent. I mean, I could see if you wanted to get you could get the most out of whoever you're talking about, whether they're going to be UFC level or not. But Mike Jackson isn't UFC level, really. And I think CM Punk could have done a lot better if, instead of working with Rufus Sport for the last, 4 years, he'd been working, say, Rafael Cordero down at King's MMA. You know, King's MMA I bring up a fair amount because they're very famous for their hard sparring. But what it does is it forces you to sink or swim. And, you know, we don't see the guys who sink. We only see the guys who stick with it. But hard sparring, generally, you know, I'm not a huge fan of, because, you know, you look what happened to guys like Wanderlei Silva. But equally, there's so much proof in the, you know, the proof is in the pudding, and there's so much proof in terms of like Beneil Dariush, Fabricio Verdum. So many guys come through there who didn't have any striking, and then they just gravitate towards 2 or 3 things that they really like doing, and they learn to do it with aggression, and they learn to fluster much better technical strikers. If you watch Dariush versus Barbosa, which has been revised so much in people's minds because of the knockout, but he had Barbosa on the ropes for a lot of that fight. Dariush has done it against much better technical strikers, just with a good body kick and a good 1-2, and lots of aggression and pressure, and sort of knowing how to stay on top of his man. Fabricio Verdum continues to overwhelm top heavyweights, or up-and-coming heavyweights, just with a 1-2, a double collar tie, and a couple of kicks. You know, he's not a very good technical striker all around, but he has a few things that he does well, and he really puts the pace on guys and stays in their face. And it's that aggression, you know, hard sparring forces you to streamline what you're doing. Well, it's the same as if you worked in like a factory and you would get fired if you didn't get, you know, I don't know, 80 fish gutted an hour or something like that. You'd find a way to get very, very quick at it. You wouldn't be thinking about it too much. You'd just work out a way. And I think that's what hard sparring does. You know, you work out a way to get on offense, to stop getting hit, to land your own strikes so that the other guy isn't striking you. And for a while it looks retarded, like if you've seen that Wanderlei Silva versus Fabricio Verdum sparring back in the day. But Fabricio Verdum sharpened up pretty quick. And he hasn't changed much in a few years now, but he found the stuff that he needed very, very quickly. And I think that sort of training would have helped CM Punk a lot. I think training with a really clever technical coach like Duke Rufus, who really likes to focus on like keystone counter punches and things like that, and counter combinations and stuff, I don't know if that's as good for him when he really just needed someone who could bring the dog out in him, man. You know, there are a lot of people who are like, just CM Punk's just not made to fight, and that may well be true. But I think if you had him fighting most days in the gym, you'd quickly find out whether he was or not, and he would either quit quicker or he would learn to fight. So the first round was pretty awful. Actually, the whole fight was pretty awful. But I have seen much worse fights in the UFC this year alone. Beck Rawlins versus Ashley Lee Evans, for example. There have been a lot of fairly bad fighters in the UFC recently. More so in the women's divisions because the talent is so thin on the ground. But, you know, CM Punk, fair play to him. He went for it. Mike Jackson seemed like he was carrying him. Would not be surprised if he bet on himself by decision. Punk did try, he was trying to jump guard on guillotines that weren't really there. He was basically in a position where Mike Jackson was hitting a duck under on him. So his elbow was way up in the air, in impingement or whatever it is. And he was trying to jump guard on him there, playing a lot of knee shield guard and just getting hit in the head. And there was no pressure on him to stay in the guard. He could have hit a stand-up whenever he wanted. He seemed to be wanting to play the guard but not actually attacking. And that's just really an inexperienced thing. There's no... and it's also, it tells you that he wasn't actually getting hurt that badly by Mike Jackson, because there was no urgency there. He wasn't, I have to get out of here or I have to attack him. He was just sort of like, oh, okay, I can rest here while getting punched in the head. You can't argue with the guy's toughness, because he was getting outgunned completely on the feet, and he was just getting beaten up on the floor. But it was a pretty embarrassing fight for him. And not a great fight for Mike Jackson, because, people expected him to put him away. But hopefully that whole experiment is over now for the UFC. If Punk really wants to carry on with it, get to a different gym, I'd say. Somewhere where they'll make you fight like an animal, and go to the regionals and have a couple of regional fights. And then if they got Punk back on a Tuesday night Contenders series or whatever it is, that would be the biggest ratings of the season. If he had gone away and won 2 regional fights against bums, fellow bums, he's a bum too, but at this point... if he went away and won a couple of fights and then came back to the Contender Series, you could hype that episode up as, the redemption angle of CM Punk, and that would be the highest rated program you ever did, basically, on the UFC Fight Pass or whatever it's on. Never say never. He could go away and become a serviceable fighter. It will just take a little bit of getting hit in the head, to be honest. Then what happened? Tai Tuivasa versus Andrei Arlovski. I'll be honest here, Andrei Arlovski impressed me. Took a lot of hard shots. Really took the fight to Tuivasa. Didn't look... He looked neither right-hand happy nor Wallenstall happy. He was actually fighting and doing well. Through some kicks, through some different looks. And I was very surprised with how small Tai Tuivasa looked. I mean... I forget how fucking gigantic Andrei Arlovski is, but he is a monstrous man. Tai Tuivasa looked very small in this fight, having come from that fight against Rashad Coulter and Cyril Asker, where he looked big. And Tai Tuivasa looked good here. I thought he did a lot of interesting stuff, mixed up his looks, hit some nice body shots, actually looked like he trained, as a boxer at some point. Aside from that first round Andrei Arlovski mount pull, which I believe he did against Marcin Tybura as well, aside from that, I thought it was a good, evenly matched fight. And there were some good looks from both guys. Which rounded out, 3 for 3 in heavyweight fights. They were all entertaining. When has that ever happened? I will still say that it's a joke that Andrei Arlovski keeps getting booked. Same with Overeem. They're good fighters, but they shouldn't be fighting with the amount of times that they've been knocked unconscious. Anyway, Holly Holm versus Megan Anderson. I put out an article last week called "Is Megan Anderson?" It was going to be called "Should You Care About Megan Anderson?" But I felt that was too harsh, so I was like, "Megan Anderson, the last hope to beat Cyborg," something really generic, which pissed people off. But the article was basically about, oh my god, Megan Anderson's striking is not good. She came out here, it looked a little bit better, but it was mainly her aggression seemed to stifle Holly Holm very quickly. Holly Holm, someone asked me on the comment page of that article, should I bet on Holly Holm? I was like, never bet on a Holly Holm fight, full stop. She could come out and just do nothing for 3 rounds, as she has been wont to do against people like Betch Kohea, of all people, and then suddenly kick her in the last round. But, up until that point, she was terrified of Betch Kohea for some reason. But yeah, she came out and she was Holbeeb Holmagomedov. She took her down easily, dominated the fight from top position. Megan Anderson didn't look like she had anything. Megan Anderson did all right in a few of the clinches, and that's what I was saying in my article. Megan Anderson is a better clinch fighter than she is a striker. She's very good at that thing that Jermaine Duradamine does. She gets ahead under her opponents. She's very, very tall, so her hips are miles behind her, and she can really build up on the knees. She really hurts people with knees to the body and knees to the head along the fence. But yeah, Holm just held her down and really controlled her for the 3 rounds. Never really looked that close to finishing. Her main offense was elbowing the leg that was trapping her in half guard. But fair play to Holly Holm. End of this fight, she revealed she was 36. Natalie Portman turned 37 last week. Yeah, people are just getting hotter. We are doing well as a race. The human race, that is. We're producing hotter, older people. But yeah, she's in incredible shape, Holly Holm. And all through the fight, they were saying, yeah, she's actually a bantamweight. And she went even with Cyborg in the clinches. I think she was saying, like, you know, I learned all this stuff. Why am I not using it in my fights in the post-fight interview? And I think that's true. You know, she, you know, aside from the Czech Congo kneeing at the thigh, she doesn't do anything with her clinch, even when she's taken the double underhooks, moved the opponent to the fence, you know, got the dominant position there, and is holding it very well, but doing nothing with it because she's so defensively minded in the clinch. It's like the striking is my thing. And I think, you know, if she went against Cyborg again with a decent aggressive grappling game plan, she could do much better. You know, threaten a few trips, threaten a few takedowns, use strikes from the clinch in combination with those, and you'll open up everything a lot more for yourself on the feet. I'm sort of interested in seeing her fight Cyborg again just because she is clearly the only really good technical striker that Cyborg's fought and the only good, really well-rounded fighter that Cyborg's fought. But equally, I also don't care about seeing that fight again. But yeah, Megan Anderson hype train derailed temporarily, until she gets another win at least. But then you got the problem of who does she beat? There's no one else in the fucking division. Bring in Julia Budd, maybe? Swipe her out from Bellator? Because they got to be paying her 6 figures at least to turn up and fight nobody. Oh, fucking women's featherweight. Anyway, Colby Covington versus Rafael Dos Anjos. I watched that over the top of my phone. I won't lie to you and say that I watched the whole thing and I saw lots of interesting stuff. I think it's Colby Covington. I think, like, every time I see something that he said, I don't have this, like, reaction of hatred that you're supposed to have. You know, I think Patrick Wyman hit the nail on the head a little while ago when he said, you know, at least when Chael Sonnen or Conor McGregor did it, you got the sense there was like a wink and a nudge, and they had this underlying charm to them, whereas Covington is just a knob. And, you know, X-Pac heat is the term. Like, I don't want to hate him, I'm just not interested in seeing him. And it's worked on some people. Like, there's a load of people now super psyched to see a very boring Colby Covington versus a very boring Tyron Woodley. So fair play to Covington for actually selling the fight. But yeah, just when he's on the screen, I'm just not that interested in watching him. Apologies, but that's how that happened. I had the thing on. I was just texting the whole time. / looking at pictures of Doug Young. Dude was jacked. Main event, Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero. What you wanted to hear about. This was such a good fight. Such a good fight. I mean, I said in my article, once in a generation rivalry they found here, and I think that's absolutely true. Obviously, Whittaker is now 2-0 on paper against Romero, but the fight was so different to the first, and so much closer than the first, which in itself was fairly close. I think, you know, you could... It obviously depends, because the thing was, the first fight was one of the best fights I've ever seen in the UFC, or in MMA generally. It was really high-level MMA, really exciting fights, both combining, for a world title, which is even better. But that first fight, about 150,000 people bought the pay-per-view. So not a very... I mean, obviously, most of the people... most of my audience probably steal it, but that's still a very small number of people. And, you know, the buy rate reflects sort of overall interest in something. I really hope they got some more eyes on it this time, because a third match, if you got a good number of eyes on that fight, a third match would go down a fucking treat. They put the first fight on YouTube this week, which I thought was a fantastic decision. I don't know how much they hyped that. If they'd been tweeting from all their accounts all the time, make sure to watch this fight. I think they'd have done much better, because that fight, you know, nobody bought it the first time round. But if it's out there free, that's the best of MMA. You're going to get people interested. Anyway, so many interesting things happened in this fight. I cannot recommend you highly enough to read my fucking article, because I actually felt really motivated writing it, and it came out really good. There were so many interesting principles on show in this fight. You know, when we talk about principles, people lose track of this. Like, I sometimes see people going like, oh, Drexler thinks that everyone thinks a mile a minute and is, oh, I'll place this foot here and this, that. No, we're talking about principles and things that people have practiced in training hundreds and hundreds of times and how they match up. And, you know, when we say this guy got knocked down because of this, that's still the principle getting him knocked down. I'm not saying someone consciously made the decision to exploit that principle, but principles are what we talk about. Which we're going to get onto in the 5th round knockdown, because that's a really interesting one. But right from the get-go, Robert Whittaker came out wanting to stamp on Yoel Romero's lead leg, and he clearly expected like a fencing match with sidekicks, like like a 1970s karate tournament, because he came out ready to sidekick Romero's lead leg, and Romero came out orthodox, and we all went, well, he does change stances a lot, but he never went back southpaw. He went back for southpaw for like 2 occasions in the entire fight. So Romero threw Whittaker off by doing that, which was a great move. And Whittaker continued to stamp on his lead leg anyway, which meant sidekicking across himself, which is quite dangerous. Can be very difficult to follow up on it for a start, because you're not falling down into that lead foot outside the opponent's lead foot position, which is so nice for threading through the rear hand in the open guard situation. But also, the danger with sidekicking, and straight kicking generally, and we'll get onto this in a minute too, is the kick occupies the line between you and the opponent, which means that it's very good for jamming them. If they try and step in on you while you're straight kicking, they won't get most of the kick. They might stifle it a bit, but that knee is still between you and them. It's not like a round kick where if you throw it and they step up the center, they can knock you down or knock you out even. So that's why straight kicks are so great for fighting against someone, keeping someone off you. It's like a straight punch. You're occupying that middle space. You're taking the straightest line to the target, and you really just... That's what scientific fighting is based on. As Joe Gans said, straight hitting gets boxers plums. A headline I still don't understand. But, of course, if you get your leg knocked offline one way or the other, the opponent can step in on you and you have really overcommitted. If you watch Stephen Thompson, when he misses a side kick, he doesn't try and do anything with it. He just runs a mile and resets, because you are giving up a very bad position. We talk about it when guys like Sanchai and Boaka, when they catch the leg and drag it across the opponent's body, that is you taking an angle without moving to an angle. You have moved the opponent in relation to you. So if you catch a left kick on your right forearm, drag it across with your left hand so that it's coming across your body, the opponent is out of position, you are essentially on a dominant angle on them, and they're on one leg. So all very bad stuff. So every time that you kick across yourself with a side kick to catch the opponent's leg when you're in a closed guard situation, so orthodox versus orthodox or southpaw versus southpaw, when you side kick with your lead leg to their lead leg, you are increasing the odds of that just happening already without them doing anything. So very dangerous stuff, but Robert Whittaker went to it really frequently. It was sort of like, you stamped on my knee and you put me out of action for half a year, and then I got a staph infection for the other half of the year. I'm going to stamp on your knee, motherfucker. So he did that for the whole fight. And Romero looked a little bit surprised by that. He never really adjusted to it fully. Wasn't retracting the leg, wasn't taking it away, wasn't bouncing back, wasn't picking up the leg or anything like that. So it looked like he expected the stance change to throw off Whittaker, but also was surprised when Whittaker kept going to the sidekick. The jab worked really well. I mean, Romero, we're going to talk about the 52 now. Do he know the 52? He do know the 52. But yeah, Yoel Romero in the Rockhold fight was doing all the fucking cross-arm guard stuff with the arms the wrong way around. He actually learned to do it the right way around for this fight, which is good. And he actually caught a left hook off the cross guard in the 4th round, which stumbled Whittaker briefly. And that is the counter from the cross guard. You want your left hand, you want your lead hand low and your rear hand over the top, so that you can turn back into the stonewall position if you want to, like Archie Moore used to do, and also so that when you take a punch on your cross guard, you can swing that left hand round from underneath and crack him with a left hook. Very hard to do that with your hand on top, with your left hand on top if you're in an orthodox stance. Try it. There you go. That's the solution there. Try it both ways around. You will find that having the lead hand lower makes for better lead hand hooking. But he was doing lots of projection in the elbows. He used a very high guard with his forearms, where it was like, they used to call it the triangle guard when Manny Pacquiao did it, where you got your hands really high, so you're exposing your body, but you got your, like, the nearer the elbow on your forearm, when the opponent hits it, the worse it is for them. It's like the shin on checking kicks. The nearer the knee, the top end of it is the really hard bit that they don't want to kick. The same with the forearm. So you're trying to take punches on the thickest bit of the forearm and the elbow. When we talk about like limb destructions and things, people think, you should be trying to parry their punch onto your elbow. That's not really the idea with this projected elbow stuff. The idea is you make it very risky for the opponent to punch full power at your head. And that absolutely worked. Whittaker cracked I think it was about 1 minute 40 left in the first round. He throws a right hand and it hits right on the point of Yoel Romero's elbow. And then he's been trying to throw a right hand around the guard too, and he twanged his thumb just before that too. And then he hits it again in almost immediately afterwards. And those three are like the last three good right hands he throws, because he breaks his thumb at some point during that. And obviously, he said that he just couldn't feel his arm, like up to his elbow, basically. So he didn't know that his thumb was broken. He thought his hand was broken. You know, if he knew, we'd know how he did it and how he could avoid it. And, maybe he could work out a way to punch with like his bottom three knuckles or something. But that's just not how it works in a fight, especially if you've got the adrenaline pumping and just the pain is going to be throbbing through your whole hand. You're not going to know which part is hurt. But yeah, the projecting of elbows did work for him there. But he was doing a very high guard for most of the fight, and that made the jab just thread up the middle constantly. And if you watch the second round, they were surprised how quickly Yoel Romero's eye swelled up. The jab and the lead hook were going in over and over again, and he was pairing those lovely, even before the right hand was out of the equation. But after that, he was just, he only had one hand, so he was going to it more and more frequently. And it swelled up his eye beautifully. So within the first two rounds, you got Romero down an eye, Whittaker down a hand. These guys just take lumps out of each other every time they fight. It's absolutely fucking brilliant. And they're both good enough that they can adapt and fight differently on the fly. It's so good. Romero, obviously we've said before that he takes a lot of breaks. And with the arduous weight cut, he was taking more breaks than usual here. The first round he did nothing. I've had people say that could have been a 10-8 round. And if you look at the actual scoring criteria, yeah, it could. Because damage isn't actually on the scoring criteria. And he did land so many effective strikes. And Romero did nothing. It's supposed to be like time controlling and time striking effectively or whatever it is. There's a case for it. I didn't score it 10-8 personally, but you could argue that because Romero did nothing in that first round, and Whittaker drove such a high pace in that first round, it could have been a 10-8. But we're not going to do scoring stuff because it's all bollocks. What I saw was a really close fight with both guys making tons of adjustments, and I think I came out with a draw at the end of it when I scored it in my mind reluctantly the first time through. But when I came out at the end, I was like, I'm happy. I don't really care who wins. I think it should be a draw, but you're not going to have trouble selling a rematch if it goes to Whittaker. Anyone who saw the match will know that it was close enough that you could justify a rematch, especially if Romero goes and smashes another top middleweight. I've lost track of what I was saying. Sorry, we talk about first round, but Romero was taking tons of breaks. Did nothing for the first round. Second round, he's starting to counter more off his shell. Third round, he finally cracks him, and it's off a front kick that bounces off the body the wrong way, and he steps down the centre. It was absolutely glorious. Caught him with the right hand, sent him stumbling, and Robert Whittaker did a fantastic job of fighting hurt here. We were talking about it earlier. There is no right way to fight hurt in MMA. You can't just cover up. You can't just do this. You can't just do that. But he was doing a wonderful job of rotating between everything. He was grabbing a hold of the single. He was clinching. He was striking back. He was moving his head. He was running, and he used it all in good balance to keep Romero sort of panicking. Like Romero got real tunnel vision, just focused on the head and was just swinging. And he really tired himself out, walked onto a couple of nice elbows at one point, and that settled him down briefly as he shot for a takedown. But on the other end of that, there were also some moments where Whittaker was in extreme danger because he kept working. Like, he threw a body kick along the fence, like a left roundhouse to the body, and it went in under Romero's right arm. It was a nice connection, but there was no point doing it because he immediately got hit in the head with the right hand and was stumbled again, or stumbled back into the fence again. What he did use a lot was a nice little pushing kick off the fence. He was using the lead leg push kick quite a lot, and that's something that Benson Henderson did a while back. I think it was against fucking huge lad. What was his name? Brandon Thatch. And the lead leg push kick along the fence can be really nice if the opponent's just opening up and swinging, and that's what it did. It just nudged Romero back like a couple of inches so that he adjusted, and then Whittaker ran out the side door. But the last knockdown was really nice because the whole fight Romero had been orthodox. Last round, Whittaker comes out, changes to southpaw, starts side-kicking him in the body and trying to side-kick him in the head with the sweet chin music, trying to get Yoel Romero chasing him. Then he changes back to orthodox. Romero changes to southpaw for like the second time in the fight. Very, very briefly the first time he did it. Changes to southpaw very much. And to be fair, when he went southpaw the first time, Whittaker immediately threw the right front kick, which he hadn't thrown at any other point in the fight, which was really good. You saw Whittaker acknowledge that he changed stance and that the matchup was different now. And he did that, and then Romero immediately went back to orthodox. But this time in the 5th round, he steps up for that foot sweep / low kick on the lead leg, and then throws the left hand. And Whittaker had been, whenever he missed a kick or missed a swing, he would duck while running out to his right side. And because Romero would swing the left hook, he'd get under it, and he'd be past Romero's lead shoulder and lead foot. So Romero couldn't effectively swing at him once he got past it, which is just, that's the difference between the stance matchup, really, when you're circling that way. It's the same in the stance matchup. When you match up orthodox versus southpaw, you try and get past the opponent's lead foot because you can shut down a lot of their offense that way too. But he was going as if they were orthodox versus orthodox, but Romero was southpaw. So Romero swings the left hand, Whittaker runs out ducking under it, thinking that he's fairly safe, and Romero steps forward with his left foot, loads up again, and cracks him with the left hook as he's coming up out of this duck. Really cool sequence. Check out the article, it's all in there. But that's not something that, I don't know if Romero thought of it on the fly, but it was something that Whittaker had been getting away with all fight, and then this change of stance made it different, and he didn't realise, and that's why he got cracked. Absolutely terrific fight. I mean, I'm not going to argue with anyone over scores, because I actually don't care. I just really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad that people are talking about it so much, because that's what you want. That you want a fight that people... Firstly, it's close, it's exciting, it's the highest level MMA you're going to see. It's between the 2 top guys in the division, no questions, and everyone's still talking about it because they've got their own opinion on the decision. That's really good for business, for the MMA business, for the writing about MMA business. It's just tremendous. Cannot rate that fight highly enough. These guys are the Okada and Omega of MMA. Right, now that I've jizzed myself over that fight, I reckon it's time we got out of here for this week. I'll do some more questions either. Well, I don't know if we'll do a Q&A episode later in the week. There's not really anything going on this weekend. ACB is going to Melbourne because that's another place you can get Russian money out of the country. And that's about it in terms of MMA action this weekend. I'll probably write some history stuff for the week. If you want to get the brand new Barney Ross episode, which was in development hell for a little while, but is now done, get in on the Patreon. If you want to make sure you're keeping up with all the shit I'm writing. 4 articles last week. I hear that people have been missing it on the Facebook. They only get my hilarious quips, and they don't get any of my articles come up on their newsfeed. So if you're missing out on any of that, go to thefightprimer.com or fightprimer.com. Both are correct. And if you have any questions to send to the podcast, fightsgoneby podcast@gmail.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. That was a fucking incredible weekend. Hope we have another one in, whenever the next UFC event is. Cheers!